I hope you're ready to get fruity. It's episode 119 of Be Yourself and Love It podcast, and I'm thrilled because I just basically get to parade my new friends in front of you. I'm here with Ronnie Smith. He is the organizer of the UK Fruit Festival, and to my shame, he's lived in the same city as me for many years, probably most of the years of our lives, and we only actually met in person this year, was it? And a good meeting it was. I really enjoyed Ronnie's company. And to you people who don't know him, he's basically the fruit. The fruit. He is the fruit. He is the fruit of Glasgow, much like me. He's the face of the raw food movement in the UK. I would say probably the most high-profile figure. And he has got a really cool podcast called Love Fruit Podcast. And one of the things that's really interesting about that is he has a lot of guests on the podcasts who were significantly ill, and they went to a all fruit or predominantly fruit diet, and they reversed their diseases. And not only that, he's a lot of people who came into this way of life, which I know probably most of us aren't going to become raw foodists completely. I like heating things up. But he's not like that purist that way. A lot of people who got into it maybe just started like me. I'll have a smoothie every morning, or like a really big one, with my berries in it, bananas, and I love getting my raw fruit in. It makes me feel so much better. It was a really big part of my healing journey. I don't know if everyone knows, but my fasting instructor was an advocate of raw fruit lifestyle. So I got exposed to a lot of people who were into that. And as I incorporated more fruit into my diet and more raw food, I saw significant improvements in my health. So that's a really big preamble. Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on Be Yourself and Love It podcast.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you, Antony. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation and glad to have met you as well.
Oh, thank you. It's good of you to say that. So, to my regret, I missed the Fruit Festival this year. I had a training on. So, how did it go? What's it like?
But the Fruit Festival is like a bit of a labour of love, I suppose. And we'd had the 11th festival this year, and it was a success. There was 105 to 107 people, somewhere in that number, at the event. It was a full week long, and I mean it's called festival, but it's not. It's more of like a large retreat, I suppose, for a large group of people. And we had fantastic weather. That was something that really helped. But I've been going to this style of event, these fruit festivals, since 2011 or 2012, sorry, and I've really loved them. I've had such a great time at them. I've met great people, and I think something about everyone eating fruit together, eating healthier together, without the distractions of alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, and a lot of stimulating other things going on, brings out the best in people and brings out a unique kind of chemistry and energy, and it's a very supportive environment. A lot of people who are into improving their diet tend to be into personal development, taking responsibility. They're open-minded people looking to try new things. They're often quite spiritual people. So it creates a great group. Of course, we have to help facilitate that as well to happen by having classes, activities, having good food on time and in enough quantities, and it's a 100% raw event. So it went fantastically well. And that's, as I said, it's the 11th one, and we will have a 12th for sure. After
Awesome.
that, we might change things. I've said to everyone things might change, but definitely we're having one next year of the same style.
Okay, yeah, I really hope that'll manage to get along to it. So, It's an obvious question, and you maybe answered it 100 times, but I always get asked the same question and I try to put a slightly different spin on them. How did you get into it? That's what because no one wakes up and says, I could really murder a cucumber this morning. How did you, and yes, cucumber is a fruit, by the way, guys, it's a melon. What made you think, do you know what, warming things up in pots, ovens, and microwaves, that's for losers. Eating it straight off the tree, that's where it's at. How did you get into the fruitarian lifestyle?
Well, firstly, I want to say that I've not been asked these questions all that much because I've not
Oh,
done.
really?
Yeah, I've not done that many interviews. I've interviewed a lot of people, but I've not done a lot. So it's always interesting. But it depends how far back I go because really it was the end point of a long journey of experimenting with diet and experimenting with lifestyle to see essentially how I could feel better. And I got into my sort of late teens, and for a number of reasons, I just felt tired. I didn't feel particularly good, and I sort of thought I should feel better. And there's probably many different reasons for why that was happening, but I at that time I said to myself, that's something in me that I have to change. That's something that I'm doing. You know, I didn't think I need to go out there and I don't know, take more drugs or drink or get chase women or whatever it was. You know, whatever people think will go out and make them happy, money or whatever. I thought something in me has to change. So I started that journey of like what I can do to change. So I was doing various things like starting to practice meditation or looking into that, and perhaps exercise and different things. And one of those things was obviously diet. And it was a very slow progression for me from literally from when I was a teenager of like starting to drink more water to see how that would make me feel. And I think a lot of these things as well are often fueled by a desire to like be more attractive at that age. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're
Sure.
that age, you want to look good or whatever. So you're conscious of that, and you know, getting healthier, you'll look better. Essentially, is quite obvious. So I started to drink more water. Probably felt a little bit better, and then gradually moved on to realize like I was binging on sugar, and I've always been a binge kind of person. Like I find something I like and I binge it. And I'm probably like that on a whole number of levels, but certainly with food. And I started to connect my times of feeling like low energy, lethargy, and stuff like that with sugar. I started to make that connection. So it took me a number of years, but I eventually cut out processed sugar, which is quite a big change to make. And I remember when I started to do that, felt immediately better. Woke up in the morning, felt clear for the first time in a long time, like even just mentally clear. Went through some detox, like had some spots come out and stuff. Lost a little bit of weight. My mouth felt better. Like there was a whole lot of little things that happened that you just go, I noticed that. I noticed that improvement. So it was
If I
like
could just mention, just let me come in for a second there, because you said you noticed you had some detox symptoms, like you got acne and things like that when you stopped eating sugar. The interesting thing is for the general public, right? See if they get acne or something like that, they think they've just got a disease, right? So if you took the doctor's mindset logically, you'll say, well, I stopped eating sugar and I got acne. That means I should eat sugar, right? Because then I won't have acne, right? And that shows how limited most people's thinking is when it comes to health. They don't even think, oh, I've got a breakout in my skin. That means that's the body trying to cleanse itself. I just think it's really important to throw that in because not even everyone knows that, right? In fact, most people don't know that. But please go on.
yeah, and I think it is a growing awareness of realizing there is a connection between this and this, and the average person probably doesn't really connect or doesn't want to connect their health issues with their diet. And it's quite common when you have a conversation with someone about their health concerns that they'll say it's nothing to do with my diet, or my doctor told me it's nothing to do with my diet, or I've tried different diets, nothing's worked. it's very common that people say things like that, and I often think that they're not really being entirely honest, or there's a lack of desire to be entirely honest about that. I think that for me, it started to become clear that I changed my diet, and to be honest, sugar is one of those things that most people, if you ask people today, what's an unhealthy thing in your diet, most people would say sugar as one of the top things. I actually have changed my view on that now, but back at the time, that's certainly what I thought. You cut out sugar, and that's the main bad problem, at that time. So I cut out sugar. I ended up cutting out caffeine not longer after that, because I was starting to binge on caffeine. I just went from one binge behavior to another, right? So I started to drink a lot of tea and stuff, and so I cut that out to see how that would make me feel, and I felt better after that as well. And it was just that gradual thing of what's the next thing, what's the next thing. Going vegetarian was kind of a bit strange because it was a bit of like, it wasn't quite to do with health at that stage. Maybe it was a little bit, but I'd been going to this spiritual group, right? I'd been going to this meditation group, this spiritual group, and the people that ran that group said, like, if you come to this group, what you'll probably find is that you might change your diet, because as you work with like higher refined spiritual energies, you'll want to, like, I don't know, increase your energy, and meat kind of holds you, like meat holds your energy down or something like that, or it's a more denser energy or something. So I didn't really believe that when they told me that at first, because I'd been doing meditation and stuff for years, and I was still eating meat and all that. But one night I came home from that class, and I didn't want to eat meat anymore, and it was, there was a growing awareness there as well prior to that, and I just stopped eating meat at that point and went through a bit of a detox within the days after that as well. That feeling of like a cleanse going on, um, and some differences there. So, uh, and then a year after that, basically, or something like that, um, I'd been naturally cutting out animal products from my diet. I just didn't like how they felt anymore. I just didn't like the reaction I had with them. And all my life, when I drank milk, I would get all kind of blocked up,
Yeah.
And my friend put Earthlings, the vegan documentary, on Facebook, and I watched that, and I just thought, okay, I think I'll go vegan now. And it's weird thing is, like, my brother had been vegan for a time, and I had friends that were vegan, but I didn't go and speak to them about it. I just went on YouTube, and when I went on YouTube, I found randomly a video that was about protein, but it was actually a raw foodist, a guy called Tim Van Orden, and that video was like, it was kind of, watching that was kind of like, this is what I'm meant to find. Do you know what I mean? It was like one of those videos where it turns the lights on, and you're like, this is the end of a long quest, or
Right.
this is the, and I think I had been in a period prior to that where I'd been a bit in my whole spiritual development sort of journey, whatever. I was a bit stagnant and thinking, like, what's the next stage forward? And that when that popped up, I thought, this is the next challenge for me. This is maybe the next thing. And I think partly as well, I saw it on the phase of, this is another stage of spiritual development. Like, this is something, like, I still saw it in that perspective. At the same time, there was still that vanity of, like, if you eat the healthiest foods, maybe your body. Because part of Tim's video was about how he was like a muscly guy without having to do much exercise and stuff and all, which is probably not entirely true, but that's the way he put it across. So I thought, and there's that thing of, like, chimpanzees and gorillas are way stronger than us, and I thought, maybe this is like a ticket to, like, superhuman abilities, you know?
That's
So
yeah.
So it just got me curious enough to sort of go, let me start trying this out, and just, like, give it an experiment or whatever, and not really very seriously think about it, but just very slowly experimenting with it. And in the first week that I was kind of raw and vegan at the same time, I kind of went raw and vegan at the same time. I just saw the benefits. Like, I'd had this growing awareness of these pains in my hips and my knees, and that just disappeared. And it was just so obvious and so quick, and it just kind of that it's things like that made me think I was on the right way forward. But
Mm.
also, what came along, especially with eating a lot of fruit, was
Mm.
these amazing moments of like just feeling amazing,
Mm.
right? And just like moments of real joy, of like bliss, of
Mm.
like gratitude, like beautiful emotions, just like more naturally coming out of me.
Yeah, man.
Like this is the right direction. So
Yeah.
that was my journey, that, and that's how I got started. And I really going to the Woodstock Fruit Festival and connecting with like hundreds of people that were on the same path. That kind of sold me on I'm going to commit to this, and
Okay, so what happened was you were getting these like flashes of like euphoria, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go to a fruit festival and meet other fruity people, and you did that in New York and Woodstock, and you were like, wow, this is it, man, this is it, and you wanted to bring that back to the UK.
I think I think the thing is like the way that the Woodstock Festival, which is kind of like this legendary fruit festival in the raw food community, and there's a lot of controversy around it, but actually the event's always been like this super peaceful, really cool vibe event.
What's the
Which I
controversy? Because we love gossip.
controversy around Woodstock was that it was started by a guy called Michael Arnstein, who was quite a successful businessman in New York, who was also a marathon runner, and he got into the fruit thing just to experiment with his marathon running and see if it improved his performance, and he ended up like shattering his records and becoming like top 5 U.S. marathon runner for the New York Marathon, and he started to run ultra marathons, and he was just like his performance was well. So he got so inspired by all this and started a festival. He essentially went to Doug Graham's retreats, and he loved the retreat, but he was like, this would be better with like hundreds of people. Why would we get
Right.
everyone? So that was his vision, and he really was passionate about. He had a real, um, almost like a political drive with it, of uh, like he was seeing the world and started to see the world in this clear light of like everyone's eating junk food, all the kids are eating junk food. This is madness. We shouldn't be going in this direction, and we need to change things. And so he was very passionate and inspired, and I think I picked up on that and the whole vibe of like I need to go home and like share this message with others. I want to help um, bring this, and it really felt as well at that time that the movement, which was maybe you would call it the 80-10-10 movement, because it was around the book, the 80-10-10 diet. Um, it was really growing. It was
Mm.
really like really.
What kind of year was this?
Pardon.
What kind of year are we talking here?
This was 2012.
Right, exactly. That's funny because I just did another show, the the failure of the digital enlightenment. You should listen to it if you get a chance, because there was that period between about 2007 and 2015 where things were really fertile online, and it seemed like all the good stuff was really, really growing.
It's kind of interesting because if you remember, like that was the year that they say that's the end of the Mayan calendar or whatever.
All
It was
right, yeah,
the world's going to end, or something's going to end, or something's going to change. And it was that was literally the year that I got into the whole raw foods thing. And
interesting,
yeah,
cool.
and
Yeah, and I was doing ayahuasca during the 21st of December 2012. I was taking it to the limit. I was taking my new age to the limit. So,
I'd actually this is a stupid story, but I'd arranged like a bonfire with friends in this like piece of land. It's a stupid. I'll tell you the whole story one time, but it was a really dumb thing to do. But we were out with this bonfire and stuff, and oh, it was crazy. But
why was it stupid?
well, because I'd said this. So there was a friend I'd known. I suggested to her we do this and have a ceremony and all this. And I was kind of thinking, why isn't there something happening? Why
Yeah.
aren't people doing something cool for this date? And nothing was really going on. So I spoke to this friend about it, she was kind of into it, and we were going to do a bonfire, and she was going to lead some ceremonies or whatever. And I think quite last minute she sort of pulled out, and I had another friend that I was going to do it with, but it's like where are we going to find a place? He knew this place that we would go, right? So he said there's this ancient land area near where he lived, and we should use this land. And I was like, well, doesn't this belong to someone, or isn't this someone else's land? He's like, no, it's okay. It's all kind of public land or whatever, right? So, and then we needed wood. So somehow he found some guys that were like getting rid of a whole pile of wood on Gumtree or something. So we had this group of guys like drive this lorry load of wood to this place and dump it all. And then all of a sudden, this like Range Rover or Land Rover pulls up, and there's an irate woman like, "What the hell are you doing on her land?" You know. So it turned out, yeah. But actually, we actually talked her around and said we're just having a bonfire and all this. We'll get rid of all this tomorrow, and she was kind of okay with it. Amazing. And
yeah,
it was a really rainy night, and no one wanted to come out, and like there was just a small group of us, and it was just a bit silly, you know, looking back. But
I think what I like about it is it demonstrates that you're the kind of person who, if you think someone should do something about that, you do it. You know, that's why you created a UK fruit festival. So I guess I feel like you sharing your story motivates me to share mine a little bit, because I don't know if I've talked about this on the show. So the reason why I got into this stuff was because I went through a period in my life where it seemed no matter what I ate, I just didn't feel full up, right? So I tried porridge, which I always do. I even went back to trying meat, not reluctantly and not very much of it, but I wanted to see if I still get hungry again. And I did. It seemed nothing, no matter what I ate, I just got hungry again. And so I was looking online and I came across this parasite cleanse. The reason why I brought this up is because you said when you found that video on protein by the Raw Foodist, it was like it was meant to be. I totally had breadcrumbs laid out for me. So when I did the parasite cleanse, I started to gradually I just didn't feel hungry all the time anymore. But that wasn't all. One, the YouTube algorithm started taking me on from parasite stuff to like raw foodists, fruitarians, and things like that. But even before this happened, like the YouTube was taking me down the rabbit hole, I naturally felt the inclination to eat more fruit and more raw food anyway. Yep. Just from doing the parasite cleanse, which is really, really interesting. So if you kill off parasite and you want to eat fruit more, that's really interesting. So that then made sense of what was going on when I was listening to the fruitarians and things like that. And that also took me on to fasting. So because a lot of the raw food community are into fasting, and that was a benefit to me. I did a bit of that on my own. And eventually COVID happens, not that much later. We're talking about a year or two at most. And I end up in Mexico. I just broke up with a partner that I was dating in America. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do next? I actually want to go back to India, but India wasn't open. So I did a yoga retreat in Mexico. And then one of these raw foodists, I've had him on the show twice, Lauren Lockman, he runs a fasting center, and he said he was trying to raise money. So he was offering 20% off. And I was like, well, I'm never going to get an opportunity like this again. I mean, it's much cheaper to fly from Mexico to Costa Rica than from the UK, and it's 20% off. I'm going to do it. So I fasted with him for 3 weeks, and then there's 1 week on fruit only. And just after that, by chance, by coincidence, by synchronicity, was his fruit festival in Costa Rica. So I got a whole 2 weeks on raw food only after 3 weeks of fasting. And see, when you talk about your moments of euphoria and fruit, that second week on raw food only after 3 weeks of fasting was the most clarity of mind I ever remember experiencing in my life. I could not type as fast as I could think for the amount of inspiration that was flowing out of me. I was just like trying to write down all these ideas that were flowing into my head. Then, of course, I got out of the retreat. I'm in Costa Rica. I've never been to Costa Rica before. I'm like, I want to eat the food. I want to eat the local food. So off exploring the vegetarian restaurants and eating rice and beans, I am again. And, you know, I still felt really good, and I felt a lasting effect for months. I would say I wouldn't have had the energy to travel as much as I did if not for that 5-week detox period. But yeah, gradually the inertia crept back in. And so that's why, from firsthand experience, I know the power of fruit and raw foods.
Yeah, this something I want to share about that, which is that, you know, when you're mentioning about the creativity and stuff coming out and the clarity of mind coming out, I think there's something very interesting that I find even with my diet, that when I go towards a simpler diet, especially times when I've done just one fruit for a while, which is, you would maybe call it a mono diet, and what I think it is, and I'm trying to still figure it out of how this all works, but a number of people have said they changed their diet and all of a sudden, like, they were looking for other things in their life. They were open to try new things, and they went out and they had more energy, right? There's something very interesting that happens if you get up in the morning, you have like whatever junk food or whatever it is that some people have, right? It gives such a, I don't know if you call it a dopamine hit or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? So people talk about these different things, like we're searching for dopamine, right? I don't know if that's something that you believe in as a therapist, but like there's a lot of people that suggest to me that dopamine, things that trigger high levels of dopamine, those are things that we kind of put as higher in the value pyramid of whatever we're going to do. And that's why, like drugs, people end up being drug addicts, because they see heroin, for example, as being like, this is the most high priority thing in my life. I need to go out and get that. And they're supremely motivated to go out and get that. And when they get that, and I think it's the same with junk food and stuff, when you have that hit of like stimulating junk food, you kind of just go, and you kind of lose a little bit of drive and motivation. It's like you've kind of satisfied something, even though maybe nutritionally you're not satisfied, but you've kind of like, in terms of your desire to go and do something, you're kind of shut off. And what I find when I go, especially to simpler diets, fruit diets, is that drive is still in me to go and do something, right? But the fruit doesn't satisfy it. It satisfies me nutritionally, but I've still got this desire to go out and do something. And that energy can go into creative things. It can go into exercise. It can go into trying new things. And life kind of opens up a bit more when you're not, it's like when you limit the variety in your diet, you're still looking for stimulation. And when you take stimulating food out of your diet, you look for stimulation in other ways. And so it's something that I've been playing around with, is that I like to try and get my diet even simpler sometimes, just to experience that. And I realize when I do that, I end up going out more. I end up trying to talk to people more. I end up trying out new things more. I go into creative periods and start writing and stuff more. So it's a fascinating thing, that.
Yeah, there's a lot we can touch upon here, because one of the things that you commented on, and people who are not in the know would think, how do I put this? Right. One of the things that I noticed when I was practicing fasting, is almost everyone in the world has an eating disorder, right? Because they think if they can't go without one meal that they're going to die. Like they feel they are controlled by food, right? They eat in weird ways. They eat too quickly. They don't chew. They don't focus on what they're doing when they're eating. They're on their iPhone. They're watching something else. They don't have a harmonious relationship to food. And one of the things you mentioned in passing in one of our conversations was that, some influencers in the, let's say, health and wellness space, including in raw food, appeal to sort of people with eating disorder behavior or perfectionism. And I'd wonder if you could just comment, because some people would think anyone on a raw food diet has got something dysfunctional about them, upstairs or something like that. So can you comment just from your experience on um, the presence of eating disordered behavior in the raw food community, and what's the difference between those people who have it and those people who are pursuing a raw food
For sure,
diet for healthy reasons, psychologically healthy reasons?
for sure,
What's the
for sure.
difference?
Well, the first thing I would always say is that there's an interesting thing that sometimes the spotlight gets thrown on the raw food movement, and now and again you get an article, this person's died or someone's children's died, and they've put them on a raw food diet. So this is the negative light that gets thrown on the raw foods. Well, the the truth is, in terms of eating disorder behavior, eating disorder behavior is very common throughout society. It's somewhere in the region of like 30% or more of people have been touched by an eating disorder. It's a huge number. And that's people that have been brought up on a conventional diet and continue to live on a conventional diet, right? So I would very much hesitate to suggest that this is something to do with the raw food movement, because it's something that is huge
Right.
across society. It's a human behavior thing, but if anything, it might actually be caused by the fact that people are put on such a poor diet growing up and force fed a poor diet. Like children are force fed food they don't want to eat. Most children are way more enthusiastic about eating fruit than adults are, and I think there's a reason for that. But um, in the raw foods movement, what I tend to feel is like people who have eating disorders can find this as a place to hide a little bit and justify
Right.
some of their behavior. But it's funny because at the festivals, I've not seen it as obviously or as much in terms of people showing up that are full blown kind of eating disorder. I've seen a few people, but there's concepts in the raw food movement, as you're saying, like fasting. There's even people that believe in things like breatharianism, of like not eating. There's obviously juice fasting. There's calorie restriction. There's all these things that tie in that for a person that has eating disorder behavior, it's like it it really appeals to them, right? It really appeals, and I certainly believe some of the fasting practitioners and some of the people that sell cleanses and detoxes and stuff have definitely tapped into that emotional vulnerability in people by using phrases and signaling to them like a dog whistle of like,
Mm.
I will tolerate your eating disorder behavior, I will celebrate it, I will
Mm-hmm.
encourage you to
Mm-hmm.
do it almost, or whatever. To the point that I've heard fasting practitioners say things like, well, someone that has an eating disorder maybe has to fast to get rid like to get rid of it.
Oh,
You know,
wow. Yeah.
this is this is like this is a different this is confusing.
Danger. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely dangerous. And within the raw foods movement, in a weird in this thing where it should be the healthiest thing ever, of like as you're saying, most people that get touched by the raw foods thing, they won't go raw, but they'll eat more fruit, they'll eat more vegetables, they'll become more conscious of eating and stuff, so they'll get a positive benefit from it. But there are some people that get touched by messages like fasting and breatharianism and all these kind of extreme things, and they go down that path. And the cleansing and detoxing thing and restricting calories is a pretty dangerous cycle, because what people don't know themselves well enough. They really, really don't. And a lot of people think they know themselves well. When you restrict calories for a period of time, it really changes you. It really changes your ability to see things straight, and it changes your emotional behavior to
Hmm.
the point that you you struggle to start dealing with life because you're literally lacking in fuel. So your body starts to go, let's just do nothing. And so you end up staying in the house, you're staying away from people. You might even quit your job. I've known numerous times I've heard people say they quit their job because they want to go through a period of like cleansing. It really means they've got no energy. And when you're in that phase, all this negative stuff comes up. You can't emotionally regulate yourself very well. Um, and all this negative stuff comes, all the bad stuff from the past all starts coming up, and people start to believe this is emotional detox, and it really isn't emotional detox. There might be an element of that, but in reality it's like if they just have a smoothie they'll feel better a lot of the time. And it's quite, I've been around people and lived with people that have been going through these cycles of behavior where they're they're going through these binge purge cycles of like trying to fast and then they end up binging again, and they get really depressed when they're fasting again, and they hate themselves, and to some degree maybe they like being in that feeling. That I don't know, it's all very negative. And the breatharian thing, which is a belief that you can live without eating, is a horribly toxic thing, especially for people with eating disorders. And it's toxic in the real sense of toxic, like it's a dangerous idea, but it's also like it sets up a complete impossible standard, which
Right.
last
Exactly.
thing anyone needs in this life is like
Impossible.
an impossible standard. It's like if you do all this right and you're good enough and you're clean
Yeah.
enough and you're
That's
whatever,
exactly it.
you can
It's
be this person, you can be this magical person. And these delusional liars are online telling people that, and it's all lack of experience. Like these people
I,
don't know themselves well enough.
it's like it will appeal to people who were never good enough to their narcissistic parent when they were growing up, and they still feel like they're never good enough and nothing's ever good enough, and they need to try harder and do more and blah blah blah. And I met plenty of them at events and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's quite interesting because go on.
it's I think that I've heard a lot about the human brain. Like we're kind of set up to some degree to try and go towards a dream and a goal, right? We've got a sense of like this is the direction I want to go in, and I want to go. And sometimes in life you meet someone you're inspired, like I want to be like that person. That becomes your like, I want to be like that, whatever. And with most things in life, like you want to start, you're doing your podcast, or if someone else wants to start a podcast and wants to do what you're doing, they can make progress towards that. You know, they can um, download the software you're using and come up with a plan and a format and do all the stuff right, and go towards that and make progress. With something like breatharianism, like there's no progress towards that, right? That's like there's no way that you can go towards not eating food, and it's such a there's a bunch of delusional stuff in the health world that is very compelling to people. There's a lot of compelling ideas. Fasting is one of them. People love the idea of fasting or cleansing because like this will be a kind of, well, literally the word fast, like this will be a quick thing.
Right.
It will be a big change, and it'll change me. And it tends to not change people for a lifetime. Like it tends to not be
Hmm.
the thing.
Interesting.
In life, I think in general, what I advocate for much more is making small changes,
Hmm.
and then once you've implemented those changes, then making more changes when you're ready for it. And I think that's the same with everything, like with
Right.
fitness, with
So,
your
so
education.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Yeah, small changes over time really, really add up. So I guess I was interested in talking about that because you told me you never really followed the detox side of it much. Whereas, of course, for me, I came into it from the detox side. You know, I had skin conditions and things like that that I reversed through fasting and raw food, or raw food ish, and things like that. So from my perspective, I think, you know, my body was pretty toxic. I don't think my detox organs were performing at optimal function. And when I cleared things out, things started to work a lot better, and I could tolerate foods that I could tolerate before the skin conditions went away and things like that. So I guess I was interested in hearing your thoughts about that, and I guess I got to. Is there anything?
Yeah, well, detox is a very compelling idea. It's definitely right now, I think for the last maybe 5, maybe more years, that's been the prevalent message that's got people into the raw foods thing, has
Right.
been detox, fasting, cleansing. That wasn't quite where I was at, or um, where the raw food movement I found in 2012 was at, which was more of a movement of athletes to some degree. There was a lot of athletic people, there's a lot of
Mm,
high performance people, and I think detox was like an aspect of it, but not the focus of it.
right.
And there was also a lot of them were quite strong about the fact that, you know, the detox could be a bit of a gimmick, or could be
Right.
a bit of a fad or whatever, where there was, and there have been for many years, various products and things that have been sold as detox. I want to suggest that it's a very interesting thing with this thing of why is it that it's compelling for people, this idea that you're full of junk and you need to clean yourself out. It's a really interesting, even a psychological thing there, because there's a lot of people that feel that. I was speaking to a guy yesterday who talked to me about his kind of progress towards becoming a Christian, essentially, and he was talking about how there's a period of his life where he was acting really immorally, and he was, you know, and eventually his kind of conscience caught up with him, and he was thinking about people in his past, including my grandparents, that he kind of looked up to as people that were like living a good life. Do you know what I mean? And and it eventually kind of caught up with him. And this idea of how in cultures around the world there's been process, like say like baptism, what this idea of like cleaning yourself out, of ridding yourself of this of your negative past and things like that. And there's a number of people who get into detox, and part of it is an aspect of feeling impure or feeling um, unclean because of other things that have gone on in their life, not necessarily anything to do with diet. So I've met people like that who have confessed that, and that's something that appealed to them about the idea that this would kind of lead to a kind of cleansing. I've seen a number of people that seem to talk that way, like almost like they've got all, even people that have maybe taken drugs in the past, I think this will get rid of all that, and a lot of people have this feeling of there's something in them they're trying to get out. So I tend to think a lot of that's a little bit dangerous as a focus. And the better thing with health and with a healthier diet is to believe that yes, detox happens, but that's something that will happen inevitably, and you don't need to like focus on it. What you really have to focus on is just supplying your body with the best conditions and the best diet that you can, and the body will do the detox. And detox shouldn't really be very harsh, or like people talk about these things, but harsh detox is more to do with things like people who are coming off of caffeine, a lot of caffeine, alcohol, drugs, and stuff like that. Like that's where detox is difficult for people, because they're really coming off of their body being used to a high level of drugs or medication, even with caffeine being a pretty strong drug. And when your body comes off that, it's like the adjustment period. And alcohol famously is quite dangerous to come off of very quickly if you've been taking a lot of it for a long period of time. So that's it. There's a lot of that going on, but for the average person, really, the detox shouldn't be very severe or anything like that. And the focus should be on not making this an obsession of your life, because it's one of those other things where you can never get detoxed enough. You can never get clean enough, you know, and this is the path people go down. Whereas for me, the healthy diet is a foundation of a good life. And once you've kind of got your diet in a place that you're happy with. You can always continue to work on it to some degree or other, but it should be a foundation for you to then explore the rest of your life and all the other things that will bring, joy and excitement and happiness and meaning into your life, and focusing on trying to become a more clean person is kind of not a very productive thing, I don't think.
Okay, cool. There's so much that I want to. Well, one of the things I'd actually like to do, and then I'll see about my other question, is hear some of the impressive stories, either from your podcast or from people that you've met who've had disease reversal on a fruit-based or raw diet. Because stories really, people will be skeptical about this, but stories really bring things to life.
Yeah, do you want me to share some stories?
Yeah, please.
I think there's one thing that maybe seems quite simple, but is very big for people is acne, right? And I think you brought up acne, but that's a huge thing, especially for a lot of teenagers. A lot of people have really, really terrible skin problems, and in the raw food world, I can think of a few names. My friend Ted Carr, he's one of them. There was a lady called Melissa. I'm not sure if I even interviewed Melissa, but there's a whole bunch of people that had really terrible acne, and it goes away entirely. It's unbelievable how much it changes. My friend Matthew's another one actually. He started off having acne problems and taking Accutane, and it just goes away entirely on the right diet, right? So that is something that's a small thing, but the amount of people that have skin problems and skin issues and embarrassment with their skin is a massive thing, and that's a big thing for people. Of course, there's loads of weight loss journeys. There's many people that have cut down on weight and still feel like they eat a lot. I think that some of the more um, exciting, I don't know, exciting is the word, but people that reverse things like multiple sclerosis, really bad autoimmune conditions that can disable people. I mean, that is literally something that can put you in a wheelchair. Multiple sclerosis. You've got rheumatoid arthritis. A number of people that have had rheumatoid arthritis that have reversed that. I had a friend. She wasn't even a raw vegan, but just a vegan that had ankylosing spondylitis, which is a form of arthritis that stiffens you right up, and
Right.
she'd reverse that basically just by getting rid of dairy. Though that wasn't even, going raw. She got rid of dairy. I think she added more raw to her life, but she wasn't 100% raw, and got rid of that completely. You've got a number of people who reverse heart disease, diabetes. There's a lady from the festival called Della that had a triple heart bypass in her 50s. She lost, I think, 70 pounds on raw food. She's like completely 100% raw, and she now does 3 hours in the gym every day, and her heart's fine. And um, a lot of people obviously reverse type 2 diabetes, which is quite common for people to reverse that, even though they're eating a lot of sugar or a lot of fruit. That's not an issue. Um, and I've also had stories of people that have had mental health issues, even to the point of things like voices in their head that have went away when they started to eat raw.
Amazing.
Like that's amazing to me. Yeah, and depression. A few stories of cancer reversals, but it's not as common. And I want to make that point quite clearly that we don't. A lot of people want to believe that cancer just go raw and you'll get rid of that. Like it's not as cancers can be very a lot of time when people when they find out they got cancer, it's already really far along.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like once you've cut your arm off, going raw is not going to fix it again. You know what I mean? There's other things that maybe have to happen to help there, but maybe early stage, a lot of cancers can potentially be controlled. And
Right.
so across the board, basically, you've got diseases of the cardiovascular system. You've got autoimmune conditions of all kinds. You've got digestive problems as well of all kinds. The digestive stuff's crazy because there's so many people that have had they were gonna have their guts removed, their stomach removed, all sorts of stuff, and then they went raw and it helped with that. You've got your mental health issues. You've got uh, and to some degree cancer, but it's more of a preventative thing with cancer.
Mm.
So across the board, and skin conditions across the board, you've got a whole number of things that it's helping with. And essentially, what it shows is how many of these issues are diet related. A huge
Right.
amount of health issues are actually diet related. But here's an important part to say as well. When you have a health issue that is not diet related, the raw thing will only work so much. You have
Mhm.
to deal with it in the specific way. So in the raw foods movement, where it goes too far is where people think everything will be helped by just going raw and the body will heal everything. And that's not the case. If the issue you have is not related to diet, then you have to go and figure out what it is related to. And I'm a bit controversial maybe in the raw foods world because like I'm quite an advocate of medication and stuff like that where it is likely to work. And I've known a number of people that have got injured or even died as a result of avoiding medication when they could
Right.
have taken medication to help themselves. So that's where the dark side of the alternative health world
That-
is.
I appreciate that you're even-handed in that way, and I notice that when we meet, you're quite nuanced and um, like you're trying to take everything in and see where it fits with what you already know, which is how I aspire to approach things. So let's hit. There's quite. I've got so much to talk to you about. Let's see if we can do a bunch of stuff. Okay, so we brought up sugar. I want to give. Yeah, exactly. We brought up sugar. So why is it that we need to explain to people that the sugar in an apple is not the same as the sugar in a donut?
Well, to some degree, it is the same. It's the same thing, but a donut isn't as different to as an apple. Like, but the actual sugar is the same chemical, basically. So there's a few forms of sugar that we consume, which is like glucose and sucrose and fructose, and these are in fruits. And I think in your sugar in your donut would be generally sucrose, but that'll just be broken down in the body into glucose and all that. Um, Glucose or sugar is a fuel source for basically every cell in the body. Everything, a lot of what we eat gets turned into sugar in order to be used in the body as fuel in for cells. It is in our bloodstream essentially constantly, which is what's called blood glucose or blood sugar. And our brain is fueled 100% by glucose. And we there's a lot of in the scientific community, there's a lot of mystery as to why have humans become so smart, or how did our brain grow? Well, it seems to me the obvious thing is we had a great supply of glucose. If that's what fuels the brain, then we had a very consistent, abundant supply of glucose to feed it, I imagine. And that to me that's the fruit diet. All the apes that are supposedly the smartest of the apes are the fruit eaters, are the ones that go towards fruit rather than go towards leaves and things like that. So sugar is it's seen as the worst thing and the toxic thing, but really the problem with sugar is that it's been taken out of plants and then added into all sorts of other things. And when I was younger and I binged on sugar, I felt terrible.
Mhm.
But really, what I learned later on is generally what happens to people, and if someone out there is having an issue with sugar, and if you consume sugar you feel really bad or your blood sugar rises, that's a sign that you're heading towards diabetes or like you're pre-diabetic or something, which is actually very common across society, right?
Right.
And essentially the culprit really is fat in the diet. As you increase the amount of fat in your diet, your body's ability to transfer and uptake sugar into the cells is inhibited by the fat. So the one way some people put it is it's like if you've got a lock you're trying to open up for the sugar to get into the cell, you have to open up the door of the cell by putting a key in the lock to open it up. And that's what the pancreas creates in terms of the hormone of insulin. and the insulin is what opens the cell up to allow the sugar to go in. And when your blood sugar starts to rise, your pancreas starts to create more insulin to open up the cells, in a sense, to let sugar go in. Well, what fat does in a high amount of fat in the diet is that it clogs up the lock, and it means the insulin doesn't work as well. And that's really what type 2 diabetes is. What happens then is the sugar just starts to build up in the bloodstream because it can't cross the blood barrier into the cells. And when you've got a high amount of blood sugar, too high amount of sugar in your blood, it's damaging to the body. Like, so everything in your body has to be regulated within very set limits. And when we go outside of those limits, it can be damaging. But everyone blames the sugar, and really it's the fat in the diet. But it's kind of the combination. So some people then cut out sugar in their diet and they feel okay for a while, and they think they've solved it. But if you cut out the fat, you'll feel okay as well. But in terms of what's the healthier approach is that the human body is designed to run on carbohydrates. And the best carbohydrates for us are simple carbohydrates, the ones that require the least amount of energy for the body to process. So that's the ones that are naturally in fruits, vegetables, plants, which is the simple carbohydrates, the sugars. But yeah, in a fruit, they do come packaged with antioxidants and with fiber, so it releases into the bloodstream, not as quickly, in a better rate. But also the antioxidants mean that some of the damage that can come along with processed sugar is limited, because there's a protective effect of
and it's got all that structured water in it as well.
Comes along with water, along with having to chew it. Like there's a whole load of things like that where it's better for us, but my argument would be that sugar is it's definitely not a toxin the way that some people would say almost sugar is toxic. Well, sugar is the opposite of a toxin. It's a nutrient, and one of the most important ones. And there's a kind of, people go towards sugar when they feel low on energy. Like there's a wisdom in that, actually, that it is a very quick supply of energy. And it's funny when people think that sugar makes them fat and stuff, and the body turns sugar into fat. It's kind of the opposite. The body would always use sugar as a preferential fuel source and store fat as a preferential storage, So, but there's a lot of stuff where people are saying today they don't feel satisfied with what they're eating. They eat food and they can't stop eating, and that's because there's not the thing that really stops your appetite for most people is sugar. And in the form of fruit, you've got, as you're saying, the water, the fiber, so you've got the density of the food, and you've got the sugar, and the combination of the blood sugar rising and your stomach being filled really helps to make the true feeling of satisfaction that most people don't have in their diet, which is why they're always reaching and snacking and looking for the next thing.
All right. I want to give people realistic expectations. One of the things that some people say about pushing a raw foods lifestyle is either that they felt, the reason why people fail, let's say, is they felt like they felt hungry all the time. Or I also heard that people, I felt great on it for months, then after a few months I really started to crash. And that would give rise to, say, the idea that, this might be good for a while, to help the body repair itself, but it's not a long-term lifestyle. Like long-term, people need to eat other stuff. This is going back to the detox mentality as well. Maybe it's a great way to flush out the system, but at some point you want to go back to the real stuff. So could you mention something on those? I'm kind of smushing them into one topic. Hunger, feeling good for months, and then crashing. Is this really a permanent lifestyle?
Well, I think that people often do this wrong. You know, that this is the first thing, is that it's not as easy as people think, and a lot of people.
I don't think people think it's easy.
Well, I think not easy, but in a sense, they think that I can figure this out, you know, or this is a natural diet, so I can go along with my intuition on this. And I think people underestimate how much you have to learn about this to get it right, and how much experience you need. And the truth is, and most people I've met, basically everyone that tries this diet will not eat enough. That is an absolute certainty almost. It is something that people are not used to. They're not used to the volume that people eat to get enough calories for this diet. And people don't want to count calories and stuff like that. So they kind of just go along with their intuition on this. Most people have not really experienced what it's like to undereat. Like the average person, yes, maybe people with eating disorders and stuff, but the average person has went through their entire life and they've lived with an abundance of food, and they've eaten an abundance of food essentially throughout their life. When you undereat for even a small amount of time, it really creates very severe symptoms that do not, on a raw food diet, don't necessarily feel like hunger in a weird way. Um, what it feels like is that there's something severely going wrong in you, because there's a combination of not having any energy, um, of feeling unstable, of feeling um, depressed. Some people feel depressed, anxious, lethargic. On a longer period of time, women can lose their period if they're not eating enough. Um, Sleep can be affected, and when your sleep's affected, that affects everything else in a bad way. You can feel cold. You feel like you're lacking something, but weirdly, you don't feel hungry. Or you don't feel like, I want to eat more bananas. That's the answer, because they kind of don't want to eat more bananas. Um, so a lot of people go through that, and a lot of people, when they talk about, I did raw and it didn't work for me, and this is what happened. That's what happened, and that's what they actually talk about. They use all those words and phrases, and often sometimes they say things like that are very telling, like, and I was losing weight and I couldn't stop losing weight, and it's like, well, that's another obvious sign of this, not you've not got to the point where you can eat enough. I think partly the reason for that is that there's still part of them that wants to go back to the old way of eating, and they've not quite learned to eat enough. They're kind of still, the door is still open to going back to the other style of eating. So it's almost like they're always consciously leaving a gap in their diet that they could fill with something else. So everyone does it. Everyone does it that starts off raw. They'll undereat, and no one believes they're going to do that for some reason. Especially a lot of people that have been overweight all their life. They're like, no, I always eat too much food and everything. But really, when people go raw, they don't eat enough. So that's a major thing, a major symptom. But the biggest thing I think for most people is there's not much support. There's not really a lot of other people doing it, and I completely sympathise with anyone that goes down this path, and after a while, especially if they come to a fruit festival or an event or something, then they go back to their life, and there's no one around them that's even making any effort to eat healthy in any way. It's not just that people aren't eating raw. It's like the entire culture is not interested in eating healthy, or eating a bit of fruit, or eating anything. So people go on their own personal journey where they get enthusiastic about it, and no one else is interested. And the entire culture is going on towards, like, how can we indulge more? How can we be less healthy? So it's very hard in that situation to maintain motivation when everyone's offering you something else. Everyone wants you to stop doing what you're doing. Everyone's worried about you. And essentially, you're on your own doing it. So I don't. I'm not surprised when it doesn't happen, and that people can't do it. But in terms of, is it a long-term diet, I just want to point out that my perspective on this is a bit different. Where people will say to me, "Where's the raw food communities? Where's the long-term raw food communities and stuff?" And I'll say, "Well, it's very simple. over the last 500 million years, there's been about 5 to 5 billion creatures on Earth. In all of that time, they have all eaten 100% raw diet the entire of that time. Primates have been around maybe 80 million years. They've all been eating fruits and vegetables. Well, not all of them, but a huge amount has been fruits and vegetables essentially most of that time. Raw food has been the diet that has worked long term for animals across this planet of every variety. So cooked food is really the experiment, and a relatively short-term experiment, and it has worked for humans in a number of ways, but there is a consequence to it. So as we are getting into a world where we've got the option to choose what we eat and choose anything to eat, then I think we should start to make the choice to go towards the foods that we're best adapted for, that are the best for our health, and will ultimately be the best for the planet in a number of ways, I think, as well.
So you don't buy that idea that humans' brains got bigger because Catching Fire, I think the book's called, we started cooking and then we got more calories and that's what made our brains grow bigger.
Well, it's not just me that thinks that. It's that there's not a lot of scientific support for that. This is a concept. It's a concept by a guy called Richard Wrangham and a number of other people, I suppose, that have come up with that. Now, he's a primatologist that has studied chimps and studied them and just went like, we're not like them. We don't eat like them. But I've interviewed a primatologist and I'm quite confused by what they say sometimes. And I think there's a little bit of a lack of, like, they can see that we're like chimps, but they don't really get it. Mm-hmm. Like, that is exactly what we're like. They can't quite.
Don't they have a bigger colon than us, say, for example, for threshing certain kinds of leaves and things like that?
Yeah, chimpanzees are weird. Like, chimpanzees are one of the closest animals to us in the timeline of whatever evolution, but they have went a different direction. Chimpanzees are actually more adapted for eating meat than we are, which is kind of interesting. And meat's quite a small part of their diet, but they actually have some better adaptations for that. But they have a bigger jaw than us. And yeah, I think they have a bigger colon. They're more on the side of the gorilla, where they've got that kind of vegetable eating capacity that we don't have as much of a vegetable eating capacity. But if you were to study our digestive system, it is far more like bonobo, orangutan, maybe spider monkey, like frugivorous apes, the ones that are going far more towards fruit. Chimpanzees are not as frugivorous. They are mostly fruit. Like you would classify them as a frugivorous. It's an interesting thing because I saw a thing recently that said chimpanzees are frugivorous primate. So, and I just thought I've not seen that very much often. I see people say other things, but that's what human beings should be classified as well. Like, we're a frugivorous primate, like primarily fruit or mostly fruit is the optimal diet. And it's just based on our digestive system. You can measure out the length of the digestive system by the area size, and we're in line with frugivorous apes. Like that's what we're most like. So in terms of cooked food making us human, I always find that funny, Antony, because like we had to be unbelievably smart to cook in the first place. Like, so in terms of the brain being big, you're talking about being the smartest thing on the planet already by that point of cooking, because nothing has figured it out. No other animals figured that out. And it doesn't matter how much meat they've eaten. Like, the meat-eating creatures are not tremendously smart. The fruit-eating monkeys seem to be the smartest ones, as far as I understand. But I think as well that some people have suggested that, you know, some people say we've been cooking food for 1 million years, or we've been cooking food for, you know, hundreds of thousands of years. And what I've heard in response to that is, like, if that was the case, we would have evidence in the soil structures and the atmosphere of the amount of smoke that would have been generated, because like there were a lot of human beings going back thousands and thousands of years, and that would have led to like billions of fires, because there's been a fire every single day among thousands and thousands of tribes. And that would have had an obvious impact, perhaps, on the atmosphere. So there would be more evidence of that, I think, of how that would have changed the atmosphere. And we would maybe see more evidence in Africa and stuff in the places we came from. So I think that cooking's been around, but what I think is it's I get the sense that it maybe wasn't as consistent. But there's a more interesting thing that I think is funny is how we've become like shaped by our food choices. And human beings are maybe a more naturally nomadic creature, which and started to settle down and do agriculture, and started to settle down in places that were outside of our nature to settle down, which was like places like Scotland, places like Northern Europe, all sorts of places that were not the right environment for us in terms of climate. They didn't even grow the foods naturally that we generally thrive on, like fruits, which are the easiest foods for us to get and consume. And we created entire cultures around the growing of food, and mythologies and all sorts of things around the food that we were creating and consuming. And cooking is an unbelievably complicated process. And things like cooking grain and making bread, which is what a huge part of humanity has sustained itself on for the last 10,000 years. It's an unbelievably complicated process. Like there's so many steps to making bread. If you really take it from the basic of growing the crop and looking after the crop, and then cutting the crop, drying the
Milling
crop,
it, yeah,
processing it, milling it, preparing it, turning it into bread, cooking it, eating it. Like there's so many. If you were to write down the steps on like a tick list or whatever, it would be a tremendous amount of steps. And in order for people to be motivated to do that, it takes me back to the idea of people almost being like, you could say that's desperation, you have to do it. But I almost think about the way that someone that is like a drug addict will do almost anything to get the drug. Like they're so hyper motivated. They'll jump over so many hoops to get the drug. And I think to some degree we got a bit kind of like addicted or like we started to like really worship the food that we were eating. And that's the interesting thing with fruit. I think it's something that's, people don't worship fruit. Even people in the fruit community, like we like fruit, but it's even people who are like hard fruitarians, like bananas. It's not a big deal. It's not like we're looking up to bananas thinking that's amazing. It's just like, oh yeah, I'll have bananas again. It's there's no sort of like huge excitement around, oh my god, I'm gonna eat another banana today, But I don't know, like the interesting thing is if the amount that people do to cook, people wouldn't do that for bananas. Like they just wouldn't do it for apples. It's just too many. It's just too much. It's like it's so funny to me.
Okay,
anyway.
So it's like what? So you people out there, why bake an artisanal sourdough when you can just go outside and pick an orange off the tree? You absolute freak of nature! Like, why are you going to all that effort?
But I guess there is a reason. Like I do think it is that bread and things like that. It is a dense form of calories.
It's so kind of emotionally satisfying.
Yeah,
the foods that people grab for emotional. Like I'm still to have my smoothie today because I felt like I started with some vegetables for breakfast, and then I ended up having a slice of toast, and I don't eat a lot of wheat. But I was on the train. Once I started putting things in my mouth, I was on the train.
Yeah.
If I just went down and had my smoothie, I would have been completely satisfied for a good couple of hours. I'm going to have it after the show, so that's good. You've got me inspired. So, is there anything else you want to mention, or where are we sending people?
Well, I've started a group that I'm using this platform called School now, and I've just started it. So I've started this thing, the Love Fruit community, because
Okay,
to
I'm going to
me,
join.
the thing, Anthony, is like it's about the community, right? And a lot of the reason that people struggle with a lot of things in life, anything that's outside the mainstream, is they don't have community and support in what they're doing. They
Yeah.
can't find other people doing it, and I think that's tremendously important. I think that's one of the big messages that I've learned in life. With anything you want to achieve in life, is get around other people who are doing it. And even like say you want to get fitter, don't go and find out what's the best fitness plan ever and research all that, and just go to the gym and don't have a big plan of it. Just go and be around people who are doing fitness. And something about that atmosphere and environment is encouraging and inspiring, and it also just it's being in the right environment in life really helps and really gets your motivation going. And that's what a lot of people struggle with in everything in life, is the struggle to get motivated. And I think motivation comes from being around others, and kind of catching that off them. So I want to do what I realized with my festival that I've been doing for the last 7 years. Like I created community in a way, and that's what people really got out of it. They said the best thing was meeting the other people. That was the most valuable thing for them. And we created this community experience, which people in the modern world are not having as much of anymore. And it's a nourishment in itself that people are lacking, is that experience of community and doing things together, which people get a taste of when they go to maybe a football match, go to a musical event, and things like that. They get a taste of like us all together doing something. It's a good feeling, but it's kind of sometimes too big and too anonymous. When you actually get a smaller group of people who all start to get to know each other and like and trust each other, it can be a really it's the human experience. It's the way people are meant to be. I also believe that that's a big part of the epidemic of mental health issues and stuff, is that people are not they people are meant I mean I believe people are meant to live surrounded by people. Like, and as much as that's difficult for a lot of people to fathom and imagine, um I believe that that's how we're really meant to function. And the whole addiction to the screen thing that people are worried about, like we're using
Absolutely.
social media too much, to me is there's a dissatisfaction people have, and they're looking for, essentially this is always looking for people. Like you have a natural thing to be consistently people watching and picking up on the cues and seeing what's happening with everyone and all that stuff. So in Glasgow, where I come from, my real thing is I wanted the feeling of community I've had at these festivals that I've traveled the world to experience and went to these other countries and then left, and then I don't see these people ever again. I want to create that in Glasgow, actually. I want to create a group. But my first little step forward is to create this online group. And the school thing allows me to put on courses, allows me to, there's a calendar on it, there's a chat on it, like a Facebook group chat, and it seems to be pretty cool and seems to be working for people. So that's the Love Fruit community, is the basic name of it, which is similar to the podcast I do, the Love Fruit podcast. But I certainly want to do some stuff in Glasgow where I'm sharing this information and creating a place for people just to be around others that are taking steps forward. I'm not really entirely about trying to get people to change their diet entirely or go 100% raw. I just think the message of eating more fruit, and that fruit should be higher up in the
Right.
hierarchy of things,
Right.
of what's valuable to us.
Okay, so remember, people at home, your mother was right. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Get that raw fruit in. And until next time, be yourself, but don't just be yourself and love it. Thank you, Ronnie, so much for joining me on Be Yourself and Love It podcast.